Hi, in this demo video, I'm going to demonstrate how S/4HANA Cloud can be connected to the Ariba network. The goal is to make a better, quicker, easier communication between buyers and suppliers. In the video, first do a quick introduction of the situation, then straight go to the demo, and I finalize by explaining how the setup of the architecture actually is. So let's go to the introduction first. Very often the situation is like I have here in this slide. A buyer has a modern ERP like S/4HANA Cloud, and the supplier may have their ERP as well. Now, the buyer very often still has point-to-point connections to their suppliers, meaning there's a lot of manual work, including emails, phone calls, paper-based ordering. Therefore, the buyer must manage all these one-to-one connections, which is, at least to say, not very efficient. The same is for the supplier. The supplier has to deal with many customers, and very often with each customer, they have to set up and manage individual communication channels, including paper-based communication, email, you name it. So in my eyes, if you have a modern ERP with manual communication handling, that means a lot of missed opportunity to improve your business. So a better approach would be that instead of having multiple connections on both sides, which would mean a spaghetti landscape, let's assume that you connect your modern ERP S/4HANA Cloud once to the Ariba network. That means that for a buyer, you now communicate with the supplier only through one standardized channel, where you can manage this communication using master data much better, and therefore optimize things. It's an intelligent handling of the buyer-supplier communication and all the logistics behind it. The same advantage is of course for the supplier. In essence, that means that a modern ERP using the Ariba network leads to an improved business. Just a little graphic for this. The buyer is handling its purchasing contracts with many suppliers, sending out purchase orders with all kinds of business rules associated to that. And the supplier must react to those purchase orders with confirmations, and then also with, at the end, sending the invoices. So let's go to a demo wherein I demonstrate how this actually goes in practice. The demo will be set up using a very simplified process. For this demo, for this video with Ariba, I'm going to simplify this a bit further. Somehow a buyer is making a purchase order. That purchase order is automatically sent to the Ariba network, and the supplier has access to the network with the UI. The supplier will accept the PO, will at a later moment send an advanced shipping notification, so that the buyer knows that the goods can be received. And after that step, the supplier knows again that he can send the invoice. And while he makes the invoice, automatically the supplier invoice is, let's say, created or uploaded into S/4HANA Cloud, so that, if you want, completely automatically, the match and pay can take place. Here I am logged on as a purchaser called Paul Peterson. Paul is using S/4HANA Cloud as his modern ERP. Paul wants to create a purchase order and uses for that this specific app. Now in the app you will see that I have filtered the purchase orders he created earlier on, and for the sake of speed I will take a purchase order I created earlier and say I want to copy the content of this purchase order. As you can see, all the content of the previous purchase order are taken into account. I could change the order quantity. So for example, in this case, I could say I don't want to have 22 pieces of a certain product, but I take in this case 50 pieces. So what I can do is to check details on the line item. And in this case, I want to specify the delivery of the products must be in this month in a week from now. And as you can see, I automatically, everything is set that this particular purchase order requires an acknowledgement, receipt, confirmations from the supplier. This is all to help the communication with the supplier. And now I can send off the purchase order. Right now you can see that the purchase order is in approval status. It actually means that an automatic job is running to see if all the requirements are met to automatically approve this PO to be sent out. In this way, you could influence, for example, the approval steps, including workflow. For this demo, I'll just refresh the screen. And as you can see, the status is now being sent. So we'll come back later as the purchaser in his S/4HANA Cloud environment will now switch to a supplier. For that, I'm going to log on as a supplier into the Ariba network. And in this case, I am a supplier who may not have a complete ERP environment, but they use a UI-based, a portal-based login into the Ariba network. In this way, the supplier can respond to communications with his customers, and the Ariba network takes care of the electronic communication back to the ERP system of the buyer. Right now we see that I just received a new order. You can see the purchase order number as it was given in S/4HANA Cloud, and you also see the value. Let's check a bit more detail about this order. I can see all kinds of details, like from who this is coming, any comments made, maybe attachments, but here we also see the 50 pieces of this particular product which I need to deliver. So I now decide to create a confirmation on the entire order, and I give it certain numbers or names. In this case, I specify a confirmation number, and the customer asks for a delivery date on the 16th of April, but I would like to make him happy, and we're going to deliver actually today. I press next. Everything's fine, and I say submit. This now means that in Ariba, the supplier has acknowledged the fact that he's going to deliver the products. So if I would now quickly switch to the process flow, we've created a purchase order, and the supplier just accepted that purchase order. Right now, I will make the supplier send the products, so he will send an advanced shipping notification. So for that, I could first go back to the main screen, but here I just say create ship notification, which means I will give it a packaging number. I will say I ship on today. The whole package may have a certain weight, like 150 kilos, and I say next. I can do a last check and submit. So this means that the order has now been confirmed and actually has been shipped. And here are the IDs the supplier has specified. All right, let's go back to the buyer. The buyer can have a look at the purchase orders in several ways. In this case, I'm going to use the app which monitors the purchase order items. And I'll take my view on how I want to look at them. And as you see, there are 50 pieces arriving via this purchase order. So if I would detail this a little bit further, I'm actually opening the purchase order as I've created it previously. So going to the supply confirmations. And here you can see the confirmations given. The first one was the acknowledgement of the PO. The second one was the advanced shipping notification. So as a purchaser, I can now expect that the goods will arrive. And for that, I will use another app, the goods receipt. And I use for that the goods receipt app. I will specify the purchase order number, which I created earlier on. As you can see, I found it. I could do all kinds of checks, but in this case, I'm going to say I've received the goods, and I will post them as well, meaning the 50 pieces are safely arrived in our warehouse. Now mind the number, which is the confirmation of the goods receipt. It ends on 77, because I will switch to the supplier, who now checks the status of the purchase order. And we see here the confirmation number of the post goods receipt. So this is also now known as the supplier, and for him that means that he can now actually do the last step in the process. Let me quickly show you that. The ASN has been sent, the goods have been received, so now the supplier knows he can send his invoice. Now in this demo, I will use the same UI in Ariba to create an invoice. If the supplier would have had an ERP system, of course the invoice would flow out of his ERP system through the Ariba network directly into the ERP of the buyer. In this case, I'm going to create the invoice using the Ariba network portal. So the buyer can specify his invoice number, and in this case I use something with my initials. I can give it a subscription, so we've delivered the 50 pieces. And important for this demo, I use a 0% sales tax. Of course, this can be as specific as need be. I filled in the most necessary details. I could do much more, but for now I keep it very simple. I press next. A last check, the bill to the customer, the bill from, etc. But that's simply press submit. So for the supplier, the invoice has been submitted, and for him the process basically is finished. Now going for the last step, the supplier invoice should have been made automatically in the S/4HANA Cloud system. But as a buyer, I will just check how that supplier invoice looks like. And from that moment on, of course, the batching and payment can be done automatically as well. So here I'm back as the buyer. And in this case, I'd like to check if the supplier invoice exists in my system. And I will search now for an app which actually supports that, which is the supplier invoices list. And as we can see here, the top one is the invoice we've been dealing with. I can see the reference number from the supplier on his invoice, the gross amount, the posting date, etc. I could have a little check on the details about the supplier invoice. I can see it was posted from SAP Ariba, the references, everything about tax, and also as an attachment, the XML message which has been received from Ariba is stored with the supplier invoice in S/4HANA Cloud. So here everything is set so that the payment can actually be done. To finish off, I'll go now to the supplier again, and he can see also that the invoice has been approved. So with a click, he can see the invoice he created, which was part of the whole flow, as we can see. The invoice was successfully received, it was acknowledged, and basically with this confirmation, the supplier knows that he will be paid. So finishing off again on the buyer side, I could check for my purchase order. Purchase orders, I'll type in the number. And from here I could have a look at the process flow. So here we see the process flow, which started with a purchase order being created. And after the goods receipt and invoice receipt, the journal entry got created and now being free for payment. To finish off this demo video, let's have a look how the architecture actually looks like. So now we have seen the demo. As a last step, let's explain what the architecture is. What is the setup of the solution you've just seen? To start with, the buyer's S/4HANA Cloud system is connected to the Ariba network. S/4HANA Cloud will be used for all kinds of purchases, including direct materials, MRO, and indirect spend, for example, and services. We've seen in the demo that the supplier was using a portal, a UI, a user interface, straight into the Ariba network. So the supplier communicates to the buyer on the other side of the network using a human interface. But this is only one of the options we have with Ariba Network. Because with the buyer being connected to the Ariba network, the supplier being able to use a UI basically means that the UI-based communication with the Ariba network is possible. Of course, it is possible to have the supplier's ERP system be connected to the Ariba network as well. And then we talk about an all digital system-to-system based communication through the network. To create the setup of S/4HANA Cloud being connected to the Ariba network, S/4HANA Cloud has a set of scope items which enable this architecture and which enable the setup of the overall solution. Still, there's one category of suppliers we also have to take care of. And those are the suppliers which are not connected to the Ariba network yet, or may for whatever reason never be connected completely digital. To support those suppliers, we can use from S/4HANA Cloud an email-based or print-based exchange, for example, of the purchase order being sent to the supplier, and then have OCR somewhere in the network to be able to communicate back into S/4HANA Cloud to have an automated upload, for example, of supplier invoices. OCR can be fed either via emails with a PDF being sent as an invoice, or paper-based invoices which are scanned and then go through OCR to get this input in. And as a last option, it is possible to connect OCR with the Ariba network in the form of Ariba OpenICS. And with that, you actually get a document-based communication into the Ariba network. So, on that, I've given you an insight on how the Ariba network can complement S/4HANA Cloud by enabling an efficient communication between the buyer and the suppliers. Hope you enjoyed this explanation, and see you soon. Bye-bye.